I'm going to be the kid. What the is your problem? You say what you said.
I don't have a problem.
And at that point, nothing else was said. Think.
Yes.
What did you say the first time he hit you? There was no conversation prior. Okay, we're good. Open up your eyes. Nothing at all.
That's George Zimmerman right there talking to police, and it's very important to this case, you think, for both sides to talk about who was the aggressor in the conflict between him and Trayvon Martin. I'm here with veteran defense investigator Charles Middlestat, and let's go through some of the evidence that will come into this trial about that. You know, Charles, let's start first with this police interview. This is George Zimmerman right here talking about the smothering incident that went on. Let's take a look.
Prior to you shooting him, he was on you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you were able to reach into your holster?
Yes.
Okay. You shot him at point blank range. He was on top of you, right?
Yes.
Okay. In the middle of all that yelling, nobody came out to help you, and I can't pinpoint where you were smothered. That's the problem that I'm having. And nobody's saying they saw him smothering you. People were saying they saw you on top of you, but they didn't see about the smothering part.
Okay, so that's 3 days after the confrontation. What do you make of that as a defense investigator? Does it tell you anything about who was the aggressor?
Well, you know, what Serino's looking for is to try to determine the consistency of Zimmerman's statement. At this point, unfortunately, the only statement that we have to go on is Zimmerman's. Unfortunately, Trayvon's not here to give his side of this, of this event. And so what you're looking for is either consistency or inconsistency. So Serino's exploring all of this, and what he has at this point is he has Zimmerman's statement and some other lay witness statements. Nobody really had a good perspective on this thing, and so that's really all you can do at this point is try to see if things are lining up with what his version is.
All right, that's the key, because his version is the only version they have at this point. Now let's take a map of the neighborhood right here, and as we look at this, I want you to tell me what you see in all of this. I'm going to use Zimmerman. Let's take it from the point of where he gets right here. This is inside the complex, right? He says at one point, Trayvon Martin, they both came from this route, and Trayvon Martin's coming this way. At one point he goes this way, comes back, circles the car, right? And then goes down this area. I'm not the greatest artist, but I'm giving you a rough representation of this. Now, Zimmerman at one point, Charles, says he comes back this way to figure out where he is, what street he's on to tell police, comes back this way, and Trayvon Martin, according to Zimmerman, circles back up. So there's a couple questions here, but I want to get your take. As a defense investigator, what stands out to you here? Because at this point, the confrontation happens. How do you figure out who was the aggressor?
I don't know that we're ever going to determine that. Again, I have to go back to, we rely on Zimmerman's statement unless and until we have a reason not to.
What about Trayvon Martin? The defense is going to say that his house is actually down around this area. Why didn't he just go home?
That's a great question. But we also know from this witness number 8 that he was involved in a conversation and that he knew he was being followed. And maybe, maybe he was trying to impress this young lady. Maybe he didn't want to let her know that he was perhaps concerned that he was being followed. Listen, it's a lot of speculation at this point.
We're going to see a lot of evidence come out of this trial. That's a great point, Charles. All right, let me bring in, Charles, thank you so much. I want to bring in Joseph Scott Morgan, former death investigator, knows all about this case. Joseph, let's talk about the aggressor factor in all this. Take me through the pictures. Tell me what you see. What tells you about who was the aggressor here?
Okay, Ryan. Obviously, the most noticeable thing that we have here is this focal area that's located right in the center. This is indicative of the gunshot wound. This is what we know. This is a primary point of impact of the weapon as it was fired into Trayvon's chest.
Okay, so that's his stomach. Also the hands. You think if there was a dangerous confrontation that there would be scarring on the hands?
Well, there will certainly be abrasions, potentially contusions. Sometimes contusions can hide. The only thing that we know is that right here on the left hand, the medical examiner has identified this as a nonspecific abrasion. He doesn't state in his report as to whether or not this is a resolving injury or if it's fresh.
Okay, and let's take a look at some of this. We've got the scar on the front. That's George Zimmerman on the sides. His hands, and again, you got to meet force with force, but he doesn't have a lot of scars on his hands. What does it tell you?
His hands are completely absent of any kind of visible trauma on his hands. So that leads us to believe What was he doing with his hands? Where were his hands when this event was going on? And of course, on the back side or the posterior side of Zimmerman's head, we have what are referred to as these focal lacerations. Lacerations come from what we refer to as blunt force trauma. That means that these are not incised wounds, they're not slices. This is consistent with an impact injury.
So does that make you think that Martin was the aggressor at that point?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
We don't know how this happened. The potential could exist that his head could have been slammed into the ground. He could have fallen down. He could have struck something else. We don't know what the origin of these is as of yet.
All right.